All right, folks, on today's Roland Martin Unfiltered, big news from Georgia and Florida. Stacey Abrams, she will not concede, and they want all votes counted. And guess what? Latasha Brown and Black Votes Matter, their lawsuit forces Brian Kemp to resign as Secretary of State. He says, oh, I'm preparing to be governor. No, that's not why you quit. We'll also talk about in Florida, where we are getting closer to an automatic recount in the Sunshine State. And Andrew Gillum actually speaks on the issue as well. Plus, Senator Bill Nelson is also within striking distance. Man, we'll have live reports from both of those states. With Democratic House takeover, CBC members will be in powerful positions, but also to announce they're running for the leadership of House Democrats. We'll tell you exactly who is running. And a huge issue out of Michigan, the ballot initiative that dealt with the issue of gerrymandering. That was one issue. Also, a congressional district in Maryland was thrown out. And we'll deal with this. We'll talk about with our panel on will we see actual reform about gerrymandering? Will Supreme Court have the guts to actually rule on the issue? Donald Trump, of course, had an absolutely just bonkers news conference yesterday. Then he called a black reporter's question racist. That was only one of the crazy things that happened in yesterday's news conference. We'll talk about all of that, folks. It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
All right, folks, we still have drama in Georgia where Stacey Abrams is still fighting to count every single ballot in her battle against Brian Kemp, the Secretary of State. He has claimed victory against her to be the next governor of Georgia, but the ballots, they continue to be counted. Now, here's the deal. It requires 23,274 more votes to trigger an automatic recount. Now, Abrams and the third party need to at least get 25,626 more votes to trigger a runoff. She needs to keep Brian Kemp under 50.1 in order to trigger the runoff, which will be set on December 4th. Right now, he's at 50.3% of the vote. This is what Abrams' campaign chairwoman, Allegra Lawrence Harding, had to say about this issue.
Our litigation strategy has been focused on ensuring all of the votes are counted. What this campaign has done is gone out and asked Georgians across the state, throughout the state, to register to vote, to show up, to stay in line, to do what's required to ensure that their voices were heard. And they did it. They did it in historic and record numbers. And we believe that the Constitution and democracy require that each and every vote be recorded and counted.
And folks, lawsuits are flying left and right. Democrats, they have filed a lawsuit in Dougherty County to count the absentee ballots. They also suggest that there are ballots that are out there that are still stuck in post offices, also that have not been counted. Now, Brian Kemp, today resigned as Secretary of State. He did so as he was being sued by Black Votes Matter and other potential plaintiffs. Now, when they went to the courts, a federal judge basically told Brian Kemp it's time for him to be done with being involved with counting ballots there in Georgia. Again, in addition, so I talked about what's happening in Dougherty County. They also say that Hurricane Michael impacted many government functions there as well, which prevented people from being able to cast ballots. All kinds of drama taking place. Now, investigative reporter Greg Pallas, he has been covering this. He's been on this for quite some time, and we want to go live to Greg right now. Greg, how you doing?
Pretty good. It's hectic here, I'll tell you that.
So talk about that, because we're seeing, of course, Stacey Abrams on election night. She made it clear she was not conceding. She wants every single vote to count. Even if she goes down and loses to Brian Kemp, she wants to know that every single vote had been counted in this race.
Well, I got to tell you, I've been hunting Brian Kemp, the Purgeon chief, the Purgeon general of Georgia for 5 years, starting with Rolling Stone. And tonight we saw the culmination of his purging mania. As you know, I got from him through federal court action the names of every person he purged. Our experts went through the list. 340,134 Georgians were wrongly removed from those voter rolls without notice, so that they showed up. We had at least 100,000 of those people wrongly purged show up to the voting at their polling stations, or tried to, or they got confused as to which station. And they were some of them got provisional ballots, which are kind of placebo ballots. And Brian Kemp says if you're purged, not only won't he count the provisional ballots if you're not on the voter rolls, even if he wrongly removed you from the voter rolls, he actually directed counties not to give out provisional ballots. That's a direct violation of federal law, the Help America Vote Act. The whole point of HAVA was to allow voters who've been wrongly removed from the vote to fight to have counted. Kemp just told the counties, don't give out provisional ballots. We were checking with some of the county officials. They say, "Oh, we're only going to give provisional ballots to people who deserve them." Having been to the Trump-Kemp rally on Sunday, I know the color of the people they think deserve provisional ballots. So and by the way, I was just at the polling station with Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin, and she, who's never missed a vote in 50 years, she couldn't vote. Brian Kemp removed her name as well. This is, Christine Jordan, who is Martin Luther King's cousin, 92 years old. Her daughter is her granddaughter was just bawling her eyes out because said, how could they do this to this woman?
Greg, I'm reading the Atlanta Journal-Constitution website right now, and they had a meeting at Fulton County Election Board where people told numerous stories of snafus and all kind of different problems. And also now the issue is that if you file a provisional ballot, now the question is, do you need to show your IDs? Do you need to sign? And so it's all kind of now drama as to whether or not those will actually be counted or even accepted in this vote tally.
That's correct. The big problem, number one, the biggest problem is that Brian Kemp was encouraging county and officials and poll workers not to give out provisional ballots. The whole point of the provisional ballot is that people wrongly removed have a chance to fight for those ballots, whether it's Stacey Abrams, the voter themselves. Democracy demands you get that ballot. Second, if you have them, Kemp's view is, and most of the counties are taking his view, that if you're not on the voter rolls, you're not on the voter rolls, even if Kemp removed you unfairly. Now, he removed 1/3 people absolutely dead wrongly. I'll be in federal court on that. But, whether they're going to count those ballots or not, I don't know. That may require a judge to say, I don't care if Kemp resigned today. He already conducted the purge. He already told the counties not to hand out the provisional ballots. He is blocking absentee ballots on Mickey Mouse technical grounds. Including one voter victim of an absentee ballot rejection, my daughter. They don't want the students voting out of Savannah, I can tell you that. So this is not an election. It's a mockery of democracy.
Greg Pallas, we certainly appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for staying on top of this, and we certainly will be seeing this to the end. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot. All right, let's go to Cliff Albright with Black Votes Matter. Cliff, you guys were in court today. Latasha gave me a call after the judge made his and it was his comments in court that really caused Brian Kemp to realize that he needed to resign when the judge said in court, look, you should have no involvement with this election.
That's correct. No involvement with the election, which led him to resign. It's effective 11:59 tonight.
Wonderful.
So still about
Cliff after. Thanks.
Still has about 5 hours that he can cause some hijinks and mayhem, but we're excited because, as you know, Roland, we are getting very close to the point of forcing a runoff in this election. So I believe that part of the reason he resigned may have been, in addition to what the court case decided, he's thinking that he's got it made and it's going to be a done deal, and he's trying to move on and have a press conference where he's declaring himself to be the winner. No, you don't get to declare yourself to be the winner, and he's about to be in for a surprise. As you're showing on your screen, we are less than 0.5%. We are just 0.02% away from forcing a runoff, and once this runoff takes place, then that gives us 4 more weeks to solve all these issues of provisional ballots, to deal with the fact that there are all these machines that were found. This is unbelievable.
Yeah, so there was a story that
Hundreds of
700 machines that were found still wrapped.
Exactly, just wrapped. And in the most populous counties, as well as counties where we know that that the electorate would strongly favor Stacey Abrams, and these are the very counties where we saw the longest lines.
But here's the question, Cliff. Here's the question.
Yep.
Was that the decision of those local county election boards, or was that coming from the state? I mean, who determines how many booths go to certain areas?
Yeah, so we're still looking into exactly what it is that led to these machines sitting there. It could be an issue where it's a decision of the local boards. It could be a matter where the Secretary of State sends these machines to counties, but then let's just say that, oh, I'm going to send it to this place, but I'm going to tell them it's someplace else. Or, there's all these logistical issues that somebody can conveniently mess up, which could then lead the county boards to look foolish, when in fact it really stems from the central location of the Secretary of State's office.
Pull the graph up, please, again. I want to show folks. So here's the deal. Right now, Brian Kemp has 50.023%. That's still good enough for him to win, because it's 50 plus 1. And so if that gets so what is it? If it gets down to 50.00, is that the threshold, or does it have to be under 50?
No, if it is exactly 50. 50.00. If it's exactly 50, that is not enough. It's got to be 50 plus 1 vote.
Got it. Okay. Well, Cliff, look, we'll be certainly monitoring what take place in Georgia to see what happens next. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
Introducing my panel, Lauren Victoria Burke, writer for the National Newspaper Reporters Association. We also have Brandon Cooper, Republican strategist, and Erica Savage Wilson, host of Savage Politics Podcast. To all three of you, you're seeing here, again, this battle going back and forth. Stacey Abrams, Lauren, made the smartest decision, I felt. Unlike what Andrew Gillum did. On election night, she sent a signal to her followers: we are not going to stop until every ballot is counted.
Right. Yeah, it was kind of strange to people because, of course, people knew that Andrew's race was a lot closer than Stacey Abrams' race, so everybody was surprised when he conceded so early. And, of course, she's not doing that. I found it interesting. You find, 700 voting machines that were inoperable, but nobody knows how that happened. And, of course, that's what you get when you have a states' rights sort of attitude about things. You have these very local, governments making these decisions. Nobody knows who's in charge. Nobody knows how that happened. But yeah, Abrams, did a very good tactical thing in terms of not conceding. But I have to admit, I would be very surprised if this thing flipped. I can't think of a historic precedent for it, but then again, I can't think of a historic precedent for the types of voter suppression that we saw in Georgia, other than when we go back, of course, to the civil rights era. I mean, basically, Georgia is gangster. It is just straight up gangster. Brian Kemp, we saw the people waiting, 4 hours in line, tweeting out how long they waited, that there's 2 machines for 1,000 people. And of course, everybody standing in the line is African American. It is just in your face, violation of the law. Nobody seems to be able to do anything about it. But of course, from a legal standpoint, these things are drawn out. But the way Election Day works is whoever wins on that day wins. We have no do-over process. So once it happens and once the election, of course, gets certified, which I'm sure the Republicans in Georgia will be rushing to do, it's basically game over. So it's this thing that you have to get right the first time, or you never get a second shot at it.
Well, and again, the issue for me here is that when you look at what's happening in Georgia, and this is the problem that we have, county by county rules change.
Right.
And they're different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm from Albany, Georgia, Dougherty County, and understanding that that area has been hit a couple of times from 2017 to 2018 by unprecedented storm. So you had two tornadoes that hit in January 2017, and then you had a Hurricane Michael that came in with little to no notice on October the 10th at a Hurricane 3, 115 mile per hour winds. And so you have residents that are still trying to get back on their feet from that. And then also Dougherty County is about 95,000 people there. That is a Democratic area, largely led by African-American women voting, and saw one of the top 5 counties that saw and was greatly affected by the exact match program. So there's a lot that's kind of happening there, and as you said, it's kind of segregated by county. So that's why I'm very glad that Leader Abrams did not, in fact, concede and is really pushing for all the votes to, in fact, be counted to include those military votes that are still yet coming in.
Brandon?
Yeah, there's 3 things I want to agree with, make sure very clear about. I agree that Stacey should not concede. I agree with her when she said that every vote should be counted. And I agree that Brian Kemp should have resigned when he won the primary and was the nominee against Stacey. I think that was the precedent in Georgia. It should have happened. But there's 3 things also that I disagree, and I don't know if it's misinformation or purposeful, misinformation campaign going out there. But you talk about what's going on the local level. You're right. Some things are controlled on the local level. Some things are controlled on the federal level. When it comes to these decisions at voting booths, I used to be chair of the Prince George's County Republican Party. I know this firsthand. You're talking about Randolph County in Georgia. The decision, as people talked about those closing of booths in Randolph County, that was not Brian Kemp. That was the Democrat officials of Randolph County who hired a consultant who happened to, like you said, donated $500 to Kemp, but it was the local officials that do that. So whether or not it's right or wrong, we have to have better focus on the local officials in charge of it. The second point that I want to push back on is this idea about
hold on, here's the question.
Okay, but I have 3 points I want to make
here's
sure
the question on that.
Okay.
If that was the case, why didn't Brian Kemp then say...
He did.
No, why didn't Brian Kemp say, no. Forget this, get rid of 799, keep all 9 open.
He did. Roland, he did. Google it, his office, send out a press release.
When it was first proposed or after there was criticism?
When there's Roland, the decision to close them came from the Democrat officials in the county. When all the media came out, he issued a statement saying they should keep them open. So he did say that.
Did he issue the statement after the criticism, or after the heat, or did he issue the statement?
He wasn't involved in the decision to make it, so you're asking him to be aware of something that he did not make the decision to make. When he became aware that they were trying to close those polling booths, he did Google it. It's out there. But the other 2 points I want to push back on, Roland, you're talking about the registration. I think your guest earlier mentioned that they're purging 300,000 of the registrations.
Yes.
This is something that is not controlled on local level, but is actually a federal law that requires all across the country for you to purge folks from the registration who either died or moved. So what they do in Maryland, what they do in Georgia.
The exact match, what Greg Palast said, that was 1 point. No.
That is, the purging is not exact match, Roland.
What Greg Palast said, there was about 1.2 million votes that had been purged. And there are examples of individuals who are still living at those places. Absolutely. Nothing has changed, and their names were dropped from the rolls. Today, at Fulton County, there were people who came to the hearing and said, wait a minute, what's going on? How was my name dropped from the roll? In fact, there was one individual who tweeted that the Atlantic has a piece where this person said that they they criticized the county during the primary, and the person was on the rolls, but then when he went to go vote in the general, name was somehow now missing from the rolls.
Now, Roland, let me get to this point. I want to make sure we're clear on this misinformation point. As our president has proven, everything you find on Twitter is not true. So I understand you got to tweet.
No, stop.
I know you found somebody on Twitter who said that they had this role.
You didn't hear what I just said. You did not hear what I just said. I saw a tweet. No, listen. I got you. I saw a tweet of someone. There was a story in the Atlantic. Okay. In the Atlantic, okay? It wasn't just a tweet, where they actually verified it. Well, this individual, they laid it out. What we have seen other examples of individuals who said they have been living in the same place, and all of a sudden they go in and name is not on the roll.
No, can I explain to you the process?
Go ahead.
The facts. Okay, so again, it's a federal law that requires it. What they do in Georgia is they send out notifications in the mail to let you know where to vote.
Hold on.
Let me get to this point, Roland.
What did the notification look like?
No, let me get to this point.
Did it look like junk mail, or did it look, or what did it look like?
Let me get to your point, Roland. Let me explain, and you can go rebut as you want
There's
to.
A federal law.
They send out the letters informing you.
There's a federal law.
They inform you where you're going to vote at. This is an effort to inform you where to go to vote.
Right.
Now, if
Which
the post
Brandon, which
Right.
law
Let
is
me
that?
get to that point.
I'm asking which law is that?
Honestly, I don't know.
There's a federal
I'll look it up to you. I'll find it for you.
Okay.
So, Brandon, you're
Hold on,
supposed
let me finish my
Yeah, I know
point.
you want to go another 20
no,
minutes,
I do not.
right? Finishing your point.
Because you keep interrupting me so I start over. Yes,
Yeah,
you do.
right. You're
So
500
let me
points.
explain. No, it's
Yeah,
facts. I'm
So
explaining the
how
process.
much longer do you need?
I'm
How much
explaining
longer
to
do you
you
need?
however you want to learn the truth.
No, which is
Give me
how
30
long?
seconds.
Which
Give me
is
30
how
seconds.
long? How long is
Okay,
that?
fine. Hold up.
Give me
Hold up.
30 seconds without
There we go.
interrupting me.
All right,
Okay.
go ahead.
The way that these 300,000 voter registrations were canceled is that the Georgia Election Board sends out mail letting you know where to vote. If the post office returns those pieces of mail, that is when they're sent to inactive. They're not canceled. And then on top of that, they send out a postcard with a prepaid stamp. You don't even have to pay for the stamp. So it's not just one piece of mail you get multiple pieces of mail sent to the address with a prepaid stamp. If you don't return it, it then takes 7 years. If you don't vote in 7 years, if you don't contact them in 7 years, if you don't return the mail that is sent to your house
So,
for
Brandon,
3
okay,
for 7
first of all, you're
years,
30 seconds up.
That is when you're canceled.
So how-
and you can still vote.
So how the
And you can still
hell
vote.
did a 92-year-old black woman who's been voting in the same location since 1968
Well-
go to the polls? Her name's not on the list.
Roland, I didn't explain to you the facts of how it happens. I'm not saying U.S. Post Office is perfect.
see,
there is a way.
so
Lauren, go ahead.
But that's not the
Lauren,
fact.
go ahead. Lauren, go ahead.
Let's just go
And the
over.
post office
Let's
is
go.
fine.
See, your theories are very cute.
It's not. It's
They're
facts.
cute.
They're facts. But
They're
okay.
very cute.
They're facts.
Let's talk about reality in the United States of America, okay? You got a federal law, you got a state law, that's nice. That hasn't applied to us, Brandon. That hasn't applied to African Americans in the United States, Brandon. The Secretary of State in these states and the Attorney General, they apply the law when they want to apply the law. Okay,
not the law,
that's
it's the post
always been
office. It's
that's
not-
always
oh, my
been the
Lord.
case in the United States.
Yes.
So if you want to live in your little fantasy world where it's a
It's the
law, so it's
facts.
going to happen, that's fine. But when it comes to voting in America, particularly in Georgia, that has never been
But it's
the case.
controlled by the
That has
local
never been the
Democrat
case.
county
So
executive
let's
board,
deal,
but you're
let's
blaming
deal
the
with
law.
reality.
The law was
Let's deal with
passed by
reality.
Democrats in the
Let's
Senate.
not deal with your
Robert
books in
Byrd, the
school.
form- I'm
Let's
not-
deal
it's
with
the reality.
What's the
It's the
reality?
reality
Is
that
that
it was a law
blacks in
passed by
America
Democrats in the
have been
Senate.
prevented from voting.
Of course they have.
Right.
Of
So
course they have.
so what do you
But that
think
does
this
not
is
mean
right
that-
now?
But you can't.
This is a
again,
continuation of
You're
the
not
history.
providing any facts that that's there for you. I'm giving you facts where the
So
Democrats
the facts
in
of
the
American
Senate
history
passed
that
the
doesn't
law
mean anything to
in
you.
2002.
The facts of American history is
Yeah,
And
hold up,
hold on,
hold up. The
but
very,
this does not-
the very
this does not count how many bubbles of soap there are.
the very federal law that was passed after Bush v. Gore.
By who?
The very federal law.
Who passed it?
That was passed after Bush v. Gore, and we know of one party that's been trying to get rid of that federal law in the last several years. And which one is it?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yours.
No, but the law you're talking about was passed by who? In 2002, the one that requires provisional ballots, the same one you're talking
No,
about?
it
is
was
an
passed,
issue?
it was a
Who passed?
bipartisan effort that
Led
was
by the
passed in
Senate
Congress.
that was controlled by Robert Byrd, the former KKK member of the Democrat Party.
It was passed
By Democrats.
by partisan
Yeah,
Congress.
it was by partisan.
And
It
who
was.
has been trying to get rid of that law?
The Help
last
Everyone Vote Act?
Yes,
What provisions are you trying to get rid of?
the whole damn thing.
You can explain
The Republican Party wants to get rid of the whole law.
Your columnist just
Oh
blamed
my
the
God!
original
All
balance
right.
of it.
Oh my
You
God!
just criticized
Let me go to
that
Florida.
everyone.
Let me go to Florida. Your party is trying to get rid of it.
The
All
one that you
right.
criticized.
Let me go to Florida
The one you
right now.
criticized.
Yeah, because they
The
don't
one that
want it to be
requires you to
covered.
purge voters.
They
That's the
don't
law.
want
That's
it
the
to be.
law.
They don't want
the law
that
that
law.
purges voters.
Okay,
The
got you,
ones you don't
Brandon.
like. That's the law
Okay,
that
Brandon.
purges voters.
I got you, Brandon.
Which
No,
party?
no.
That's the
Actually,
law that
no.
purges
Hold up.
voters.
You know what?
I want
Hold up.
voters
1
first
second.
tonight.
1 second. I was gonna go to Pam Keith, but see, since you sit
That's
here
the
want to
law
go
that
here,
purges
no,
voters.
that's bullshit. What you just said. Let me
How?
correct you. What happened? A white man in Ohio sued the state because he was being purged. That case went all the way to the Supreme Court.
Right.
Neil Gorsuch, who was the fifth vote,
No.
voted
Wrong.
5-4.
The Help America Vote Act requires states to
Listen,
purge voters
Brandon,
who
I
moved
need
or
you to
died,
listen, Brandon.
Roland.
I need you to listen, Brandon.
listening to you, Roland.
The state of Ohio then said if you miss one election,
Right.
we can
Yep.
purge
I
you
thought
from the
we were
roll.
talking about Georgia.
No.
Okay. We're going to Ohio.
Listen.
I'm listening to you.
Listen,
law.
the
Federal law.
Supreme Court
Yeah.
ruled that the Ohio law was valid. It just happened a few months
I'm
ago.
agreeing with you on
and
that
then
one.
what happened?
That's Ohio.
30 states,
Right.
led by Republicans,
No.
have bills
Right.
That's
now
right. Yeah.
to mirror
Okay.
the Ohio law. You said 7 years. This law says if you miss one election,
Georgia.
you can be a
I'm
purge.
talking about Georgia.
Right.
I said
Oh my God.
Georgia.
Okay, all right. Let me
Georgia.
go to Florida. No, I'm not. Because after the
I said
Supreme
7
Court
years about Georgia. That is fact.
after the Supreme Court ruled, the other states said we can do the same thing. Now let me go to Florida, folks. A huge huge battle there as well. Andrew Gillum conceded on election night. Many of his supporters were saying, what the hell are you doing? Now, he has now come out and said, look, we must count every single one of these ballots. This is the lead for Ron DeSantis has now shrunk. DeSantis is saying, I'm moving forward, of course, to put his administration together. But we're now at a point where you're going to have an automatic recount. And let's get the latest of what's happening in Florida. Pam Keith, she joined us on yesterday. Pam, what is happening now? Give us the latest of what's happening there in Florida.
Okay, so just to update your viewers and your listeners, Roland, a lot has happened since we spoke last night. First of all, we now have 3 elections or 3 races that are in recount. In Florida, we have 2 recount types. We have the machine recount and we have the manual recount. A manual recount is when a person from the Democratic Party, a person from the Republican Party sits in the supervisor of elections office, and we literally put eyes on every single paper ballot. That is a much more drawn out process. Rick Scott and Bill Nelson are now in manual recount. Nikki Fried, who was the Democratic candidate for agricultural commissioner and consumer services, which is a cabinet level position, she is now pulled ahead. So the call for Matt Caldwell is now invalid, and she has pulled ahead now by about 580 something votes. And because of the continuous counting that is taking place, Andrew Gillum is now in mandatory recount as well. So just as far as the conceding thing goes, in Florida, conceding, it's a tradition, but it doesn't really have much legal import. So if you concede, that doesn't stop you from, contesting. And certainly one of the reasons that happened on election night was because we were given very poor information about how many ballots were yet to be counted. So if you're a candidate, it's election night, and they say, look, you're down by X thousand votes and there's only Y thousand ballots still to be counted, you can do the math and say, there's no chance here. But if the Y number of ballots still to be counted is wildly off, which is what happened here, then obviously we're in a different situation. What is happening now is that there's a lot of different things going on, all of which are coming to a head at the same time. We talked last night about provisional ballots. A lot of people, especially first-time voters, infrequent voters, ended up being forced into voting provisional ballots because they didn't bring an absentee ballot and surrender it because they asked for one and either didn't get it or forgot to bring it with them. We have people who voted provisional ballots because they were in their early vote location instead of their regular vote location, and those are 2 different locations in Florida, which, by the way, is very confusing. And there may be other reasons why you would be forced to vote a provisional ballot. Well, they had until 5 p.m. tonight to cure that, which means we have this massive sort of mobilization to chase down these people and get them to submit an affidavit or call the supervisor of elections and perfect or cure those ballots. Those are different than vote by mail. Now, y'all know Florida. We got a whole bunch of snowbirds down here, right? We have a whole bunch of seniors and retirees and people who do not go to polls at all. They vote by mail. This is a no-fault absentee state. That means we have a very, very high percentage of people who vote by mail. Now, there's a lot of things that can go sideways with a vote by mail. One is that you don't get your ballot. 2 is that they don't receive the ballot that you mailed in. 3 is that they could reject the ballot because the signature on the back does not match the signature they have on record for you. And that record could be because of your signature on your driver's license or on your voting card or something else. And then there are those that showed up and didn't have signatures at all. Now, theoretically, the deadline to cure an absentee ballot that was, had a problem was 5 o'clock Monday night. But people were still allowed to submit absentee ballots all the way up until Tuesday at 7 p.m. Now, if there was a problem that was with an absentee ballot that was submitted on Tuesday, then clearly it could not have been fixed by Monday at 5 p.m., right? So we have all these VDM problems. And then there's a third problem, or, third, fourth, fifth, whatever, that has since emerged. And that is that we have an undervoting problem. So Nelson, for example, in Broward County has significantly fewer votes than the candidates for agriculture and attorney general, which means that people accidentally either skipped over voting for him or the machines didn't read their votes. That's a design flaw. That's a ballot design flaw or a machine flaw. We haven't gotten to the bottom of that yet, but there's somewhere in the nature of 3.5% to 4% of Broward County votes that are in this undervote category. That's upwards of 25,000 votes. And a margin of only 21,000 separating Scott from Nelson, you can see why this could be problematic. The last thing that is out there is that we are still actually counting real ballots. There are absentee ballots that are still being counted, and there are some stories that are coming out of ballots that may not have been properly handled or chain of custody was not properly handled. So the long and the short of it for your listeners is ballots are still being counted. The numbers are still being moved. There are still potentially legal challenges to ballots that were rejected, and there are still potentially provisional ballots that are being cured. And so all of that is happening while we have 3 races now that are in active recount. 2 are in manual recount. 1 is a machine recount. And the certification of the recounts does not take place until Saturday. And it may be for legal reasons. You maybe get injunctive relief or whatever, that it doesn't even happen then.
Well, and also I've seen information from members of the military who said they requested their ballots in October, and one brother said his arrived today.
Right. So there are all kinds of issues out there. Now, typically, a margin of victory is so big that these little onesies and twosies don't matter.
Right.
But in a situation where we are, every one of these ballots now matters. And so now, you know, each ballot may have its own story as to whether it should or should not be counted. But the Supreme Court in Bush v. Gore, which happened, in 2000, you guys remember that, the Supreme Court said, look, if a voter takes the effort to vote and their intention is ascertainable from the face of the ballot, it should count.
Except for one thing. The decision, they completely limited it to just that case, which was by design.
Which was by design. But it didn't. But there are other precedents prior to that particular case that still stand for the same proposition. The same proposition is if you are legally allowed to vote and you made the effort to vote,
right,
and it's ascertainable what you tried to vote, then you should find every possible means of making that vote count.
I got the feeling that we are going to be back in Bush v. Gore territory, where maybe a while before we find out who's going to be the U.S. Senator from Florida and the next governor. Pam Keith, thanks for breaking it down for us. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
Again, I think what is taking place in Florida, what's taking place in Georgia, is indicative of a broken voting system. It should not be this hard. It should not be this difficult. When you hear about that, first of all, we heard even in Texas where there were machines that folks were voting and it was switching their votes. And then which goes back to the thing is, okay, for all the technology in the world, hell, let's go back to the old system in terms of using paper, or do what they do in Oregon. Oregon, they mostly mail in their ballots in that state. And it's amazing how Oregon doesn't seem to have the same issues that we see in southern states.
Absolutely. And if I could go back to Georgia very quickly to what something what Brandon was saying, because I am a native of Georgia, that this Secretary of State, this Republican Secretary of State, ensured that over 500,000 folk were not only purged from the voter rolls, but then when they those individuals went in, whether they voted in that midterm election or presidential election, when they went back in to vote, that they were unable to do so and then were not afforded a provisional ballot. So I think we really have to look at, when we're talking about voter suppression.
What was that again?
That because it is under his watch.
But it's run by
the Secretary of State.
The counties run the board of
But
elections.
when you're talking about the state of Georgia, he is the one
but
who
the counties
actually.
Run elections.
They absolutely do.
Okay.
And however, he is the person who oversees all of that. So as the Secretary of State, who has been sued numerous times, he is absolutely responsible for that process and the way that that's carried out. So I don't think that we can overlook Brian Kemp's continual voter suppression, in that those folk that were purged from the rolls, saying that they did not in fact live in the residence that they lived in, when we look at the numbers of all of those people, 500,000, you're talking about 10% that actually had moved out of state. That this Secretary of State said that these folk were moved out of state. And that's why
So that's not,
Attorney General.
so again, let me say this again, 2 points.
Right.
But 2
Does
points.
Georgia
on that.
have an Attorney General? The state has an Attorney General, right?
Absolutely.
And when does that person enforce the law?
Well, and so then that's
The
the
law
other
that
thing.
requires them to check the location, make sure they live with the location, haven't died. Again, so to that point, I know you guys like to talk about how it's all at the Secretary of State and Republican level, but you have to understand and look into the detail and not just talk randomly at the surface. You got to peel the onion back. One thing talking about Georgia, when I didn't get to earlier, when you talk about the fact that 58,000 of the voter registrations were
53.
pending.
Yeah,
53 were
53.
pending. Okay, everybody in the Roland likes to say if your hyphen is off or if your accent is not there, they will hold it in pending. If you peel the onion back,
Or in the case of the Native
or
Americans
you can-
in
no, we're
the
talking about
Dakota.
Georgia.
No, hold
You keep
up.
flipping
Or in the
around.
case there,
See?
where if you had street, it's supposed to be avenue,
You gloss
they held it up.
over the
No,
top.
I'm not. I'm showing you
Roland, you
the
gloss over the
dance.
subject.
The dance they do.
Let's peel that onion back, though. Let's peel
Go
the onion
ahead,
back.
go
Roland.
ahead.
Those 53,000 votes. Do you know why they were put on pending status? Let me explain to you why.
Brandon.
75% of those
First of all,
ballots.
Brandon.
You want to get to the point.
First of all, Brandon,
It was 70%,
I've heard that
I've
point.
never said that.
Yes, you have, Brandon. Brandon,
yesterday.
you said it in the last 2 weeks.
I have not.
We have, Brandon. We've heard you say it. Here is what we're dealing with in Georgia.
You don't want to peel the onion.
No.
I got it. You don't want to peel the onion.
No.
Just want to
No.
go
I'm gonna peel the onion. I'm gonna peel the onion.
Let's peel it back.
And this is
back
what
to the history of
What was
voting
that?
in America.
Oh, okay.
This
Let's
is
go
what
back to the
this is peeling the onion, Brandon.
Let's go to
Brandon,
blacks in America
Brandon,
voting.
this
Let's
is
go to
peeling
that.
the
You don't
onion.
want to peel that onion back.
Brandon,
You don't want to peel that onion back.
Brandon, this is peeling the onion.
Well, let's talk
Brandon,
about that.
how hard?
Let's change the subject
Brandon,
to the
Brandon, it's real
history of
simple.
voting in the United
How hard
States.
was
Oh my
it?
God.
How hard was it for the Secretary of State to say this is the directive to all the counties across Georgia when it comes to this election?
Right.
Here are directives from my office. Here's guidance from my office. Any evidence of that? In fact, let me show you something. We even have the evidence of the state only telling Kemp's camp how many ballots need to be counted.
Right.
Didn't even call Abrams.
Right.
The Secretary of State's office doesn't call Abrams' camp to say, here are some 20,000 ballots that we're still counting. They only tell Kemp. Journalists find out by talking to Kemp.
Right.
They call Abrams. We don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean? They didn't call you? What you have here, and this is why. Let me correct you. What happened was he got his behind sued. And he walked.
Months ago.
Hold up, but I'm telling you what he did.
So stop saying you correct me.
He walked into a federal court.
I know the story.
And got jammed up by the federal judge. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and resign. And the judge says you should have no involvement whatsoever.
Counting the ballots.
What I'm saying here is this here.
You should have done months ago.
This man has been trying. He's been playing these games with this electoral system the entire time.
Oh, Lord.
And the reason we can't, and the reason, Brandon,
again, I was trying to talk about it. You changed
Brandon, you can sit here and keep trying to describe. Well, no, if they don't,
keep saying we're done because of hyphens and all that stuff.
No, Brandon,
75% of them were done because Social Security number was not provided. Now, Roland, if you cannot put your name and address Social Security number on the form,
okay, Brandon,
75% of them were rejected.
You want to use incidental? You want to use
Go
one
ahead.
example to explain 80 years of history.
Lauren,
that's what you're doing.
Please
You're
stop
using one
lecturing me and
example
trying
for
to pretend like I don't know the history of the Democrats' voter suppression that you're talking about from years ago.
You need a lecture.
I'm talking about 2018.
You need a history.
I'm talking about what's going on in 2018. Every time I talk about it, you guys get nervous and want to change the subject. I love it. Every time you want to talk about it,
it's been going on for 80 years.
Several years to do this.
And I agree with you. We can talk all day. You want to talk about what happened 80 years ago, 60 years ago.
That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
I'm talking about what happened.
80 years doesn't matter.
I'm talking about what happened 6 days ago.
Counting bubbles.
There's a pattern of stopping people from voting in the South that goes back 80 years.
But we're talking about 2018.
And I'm talking about the pattern that still holds today from 80 years ago.
And we need to root it out.
You agree, but you want to sit here and BS.
All right. Okay, Brandon. Brandon, Lauren, here's the deal. I'm going to do this here. Let me say congratulations to Lucy McBath. Karen Handel, Congresswoman, has conceded Lucy McBath, the mother of Jordan Davis. Of course, he was the brother who was killed in Jacksonville, Florida, supposedly for his music being too loud. His mom became an activist, and then she said, you know what, I can impact more if I'm a member of Congress. Well, guess what? Come January, she's going to be sworn in to the United States Congress. Lucy McBath beats Karen Handel in the congressional district that formerly held seat by Tom Price, Newt Gingrich. That tells you, for all y'all people out there who've been running your damn mouths all day on Twitter talking about not having a black agenda and why we shouldn't vote, well, guess what? Lucy McBath proved what happens when you give a damn. You actually run for office, and you got there and campaign, and she actually wins. And I can't wait to see Republicans in Congress have to talk down to a woman like that about the Second Amendment, as she's lost her son to a guy who blew him away because his music was too loud. Can't wait to see that conversation and what congressional hearing she's going to be in. But let's see how the NRA, Dana Lash, and other people at NRA TV respond to Lucy McBath. I'm just saying. All right, folks, speaking of that, of course, Democrats now control the U.S. House, which means they'll be voting on Democratic leadership. 2 African Americans have already thrown their names into the ring when it comes to top positions. Congressman Jim Clyburn of South Carolina says he is running for majority whip. He previously was majority whip, of course, so that means that Nancy Pelosi, she's going to be running for Speaker of the House, and Steny Hoyer will be running for Majority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who says he's going to be running for head of the Democratic caucus. Now, those are the top leadership positions in the House. Other folks have thrown their hat in as well. So in a month, they will have the election, and we'll see actually what happens. When it comes to top committees, oh, don't you just love it? Donald Trump, the woman he can't stand the most, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, she's going to be the chair of the House Financial Services Committee. Elijah Cummings is going to be the chair of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Benny Thompson of Mississippi is going to head the Homeland Security Committee. Bobby Scott of Virginia is going to head the Education and Workforce Committee. And Ada Benitez Johnson of Dallas will be the Science, Space, and Technology Chair as well. And so we will see now, you see in terms of how power is being used and what takes place there. But don't you just love it? The Trump people are going to have to go before Maxine Waters. Not just reclaim my time. She's going to be in control of the time. Can't wait for that to happen. Folks, Tuesday, huge ballot initiative took place in in Michigan. Prop 2. What they're going to do is that ballot proposition passed, and it will create an independent commission to redistrict Michigan's political maps. It passed with 61.2% of the vote. And you keep in mind, in Pennsylvania, all of their congressional maps were thrown out by the state Supreme Court. Republicans were so nasty and despicable in Pennsylvania, they actually wanted to impeach all the Democrats on the Supreme Court because they were a little upset. Y'all, they even tried to appeal to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court kicked it back, and they tried to appeal to the Supreme Court again. No, it didn't work because they were so angry. See, I noticed something here. Republicans in Pennsylvania, mad about a Supreme Court. They wanted to impeach the Democrats on the Supreme Court. North Carolina, they got mad that Democrats had a 4-3 majority on the Supreme Court. So what do? They tried to give all the power from the Supreme Court to the court below the Supreme Court. I thought the state Supreme Court was supposed to be the highest court in the state. What's up with your party, Brandon? Why y'all play these games with the Supreme Court?
It's great. You know, Roland, that's wrong. They did the same thing in Maryland, except it was Democrats taking the power from the Republican governor. They took a lot of power from...
No. I said the Supreme Court. No.
In North Carolina.
No. See, before you real quick want to talk about the governor, this is what they did.
Yes.
The Republicans in North Carolina were so angry with what happened with the Supreme Court. They wanted to take most of the power of the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be the highest court in the land, and give it to the court underneath the Supreme Court, a lower court, because there were more Republicans on that court.
Right. So again, you're saying that the legislator in North Carolina,
the Republicans used to hold a veto-proof majority. After this election, they just lost 10 seats, and now they no longer have a majority-proof in the legislature. They wanted to strip the North Carolina Supreme Court of most of its powers and give it to the court below them because there were more Republicans on that court. And I'm just trying to understand, if the Supreme Court of your state is the highest court in the land, should you not have? Should it not be hands off? You don't sit here and play around with the state Supreme Court?
I'm agreeing with you that playing those games are wrong. All I was doing, Roland, which you do very often sometimes, I was pointing out that those games are played too often and it's wrong, but they play similar games in the legislature in Maryland, which is controlled by Democrats.
Hold up.
Roland.
Are you telling me that in Maryland?
It is not a
No. I'm asking you. No, I'm asking you.
Yeah,
Now, see if you want to do apples to apples. Are you telling me the Democrats in Maryland tried to strip the state Supreme Court of their power?
Again, they took power out of one position of the government, put it in another one. It was not the Supreme Court. It was
What
the
was
governor's
it?
office. It was the governor's office.
Okay.
Again, I agree with you, Roland. It was the Supreme Court here.
Brandon.
But it's still the legislator
When you're
taking
doing
power.
apples to apples.
Roland,
Now hold up. No.
Again, you were talking about Ohio
No.
earlier,
Hold
jumping
up.
over
Brandon.
Apples to apples.
Had
except when it's my point.
I used the example,
Understand.
had I Brandon, will you at least please listen?
I got you, Roland.
Had I used the example of the voters in North Carolina voting down a constitutional amendment that was put forth by Republicans to strip the governor of his appointment powers, the state elections board, your example would have been
it's fine.
no. Your example would have worked.
No, because it's the legislator playing games.
But since your example had nothing to do with the Supreme Court,
It had to do with the
it's
legislator.
really
See, you don't get it.
invalidated.
You can't even expand
No.
that.
I get the
I'm
dancing.
talking about the
Here's also
legislator
what happened,
playing
folks,
games.
with gerrymandering. Of course, in Maryland, a federal judge threw out that particular congressional district and ordered them to redraw that district as well. Now, here's a drawing that was in the Washington Post. You see that particular district. The part on the left is heavily Republican. Dems in the state added all area on the right that is heavily Democrat. Now, court said the district was partisan gerrymandering. Now, here's the issue here. Supreme Court had the case of the gerrymandering in Wisconsin, but they kicked it back to a lower court. They did not want to really rule on this. I'm going to go to you, Lauren, first. Bottom line is this here. Supreme Court is going to have to deal with this here. And another reason why they wanted Kavanaugh on their court and why they wanted Gorsuch on their court, because Republicans, they desperately hope the Supreme Court will allow partisan gerrymandering. And Wisconsin is so dastardly, what they did was, your party, Brandon, in Wisconsin, they secretly drew the maps, put together, they used the computer and the algorithm.
Who drew the map in Wisconsin?
Republicans did.
Okay.
And what they did was they hired a firm to do it. Then what they did is, if you were Republican and you were Republican, they would call you into the room. The room was off, was not in the Capitol. They would call you into the room, and they would make you sign a document that you were not going to reveal what the maps look like. And they would show you the maps and how they strategically stripped voters from all these different areas to create the widest possible margin. The New York Times did an analysis saying that if Democrats in Wisconsin won 55% of all votes in Wisconsin, they would still be in the minority in terms of controlling the legislature because of how the Republicans crafted the districts with gerrymandering. That's the case that went to the Supreme Court.
In Wisconsin. I thought we were talking about Maryland.
No, I said.
Is
the
it
Wisconsin.
have you, Brandon, have you created some rule that nobody can change an
No,
argument?
because,
Or have you created a rule where we only discuss Maryland?
It's apples to apples. You can't.
No, it's
talk about
not.
Maryland legislator.
That's not what I just said.
Going back
Okay,
to what you
Brandon,
I got you,
Brandon,
I got you.
I explained Wisconsin. Brandon, I explained Wisconsin because that was the case that went to the Supreme Court.
I got you, Roland.
I explained Pennsylvania because that was the case that went to the Supreme Court. They rejected it.
Got you.
I explained the case of North Carolina where the Supreme Court ruled against the districts. I just explained the one district in Maryland where the federal judge threw it out.
It was two, actually. First
Okay,
off. Secondly,
two.
Let's go back. The reason you talk about Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, North Carolina is because Republicans drew the legislator. In
that's not
Maryland,
true.
It was Democrats who drew the legislator. And what you did not mention in your opening monologue
not true.
was the fact that the NAACP
It's not true.
and the Fannie Lou Hamer PAC in Maryland back in 2010 alleged racial discrimination by Democrats.
You missed the question to the panel.
Okay, of
the
course.
question I said to the panel was, let me help you out. Let me roll it back to help you out.
I got
the
you.
question I threw to the panel was, isn't it time for the Supreme Court to finally settle this issue of gerrymandering? That was the question,
Can I
Brandon.
respond to your question, Roland?
Lauren first.
There you go.
You know what? This is the Kellyanne Conway School of Argument. I want to talk about what I want to talk about, and then when it gets hot in the kitchen for my party, I want to change the subject. That's why you want to go 150 years back to find somebody who's a good Republican.
You mentioned that.
But
you
whatever.
About the history of that.
Whatever.
I mean,
Which party does voter suppression in America?
I will stop talking. Get your point out, Lauren, so that I can respond.
Which
without
party?
being interrupted
No,
by
you're
one
going to
or two
respond to
panelists.
this question. Which party does voter suppression in America?
Again, it depends on each case you want to look at. If you want to go and peel the onion back, let's have that discussion. But if you just want to talk about the surface level, I ain't got time for that.
Eric,
Go on with your point.
Erica, I'm going to ask you here.
Go on with your point.
Eric, I'm going to ask you again.
Okay.
Supreme Court is going to have to stop being wimps and deal with partisan gerrymandering, because the problem is what we are seeing across this country. You have Republicans who control 30-plus legislatures, and by being in control of that many, most of the cases, most of the lawsuits, again, the case before the Supreme Court, which they kicked back to the lower court, was specifically out of Wisconsin. Everyone is watching to see what they decide in the Wisconsin case, because that's going to give guidance to every other state depending upon how the Supreme Court rules. They didn't rule. They kicked it back to the lower court. They're going to have to make a decision on this.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad that you mentioned North Carolina, because this was something that the bishop, Dr. William Barber, really fought hard against, because when their case went before the courts, I think that one of the judges said that it was gerrymandered with, I believe he said, surgical precision. So you're absolutely right. This is something that does have to be settled by the Supreme Court to set a precedence for all states, so that this is not something that we continue to see, particularly coming up to the 2020 elections, and then we have redistricting.
And the reason they got to decide, Brandon, because of how they are using computers and algorithms to now construct these districts, it has gotten to the point where it is so shameful that, frankly, what they did in Michigan is critically important. I believe that the drawing of districts should be completely taken out of the hands of the legislature, and it should be completely about a completely independent commission that is fair and just.
And I agree with you 100%, Roland. And what you see, if you look at Maryland, what they did in 2010, the Democrats looked at the state, found where the black people live, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Baltimore City, and if you look up that map again, they went in and divided up black communities to put them in majority white districts, because they know black people vote Democrat, and to keep the hold on there. It's not just me saying that. You can look at the NAACP, the Legal Defense Fund, the Fannie Lou Hamer PAC that filed a lawsuit against it. Also, Congresswoman Donna Edwards, a black Democrat. They all called out the racist Democrats in Maryland who use black voters to keep white male Democrat incumbents in power.
Lauren,
so I agree with you 100%.
In North Carolina, North Carolina A&T is literally split. The campus is split in half because Republicans there don't want the largest HBCU in North Carolina to be in one district. They literally split the campus in half.
Right.
Again, the Supreme Court, two things have to happen. The Supreme Court either is going to rule, or there should be more ballot initiatives like in Michigan,
where
they actually control it. It's supposed to let it be in the hands of partisan legislators.
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, frankly, as we know, it's quite clear that the policy of the Republican Party is to make it as difficult to vote as possible in America. We saw that right after Barack Obama's election. We'll see more of it in North Carolina and any other place we have Republican governors and legislatures. That's just a fact.
All right, well, we'll see. Again, time for the Supreme Court to do something.
Well,
all right, folks, going to a break right now. We come back. Got a couple of more questions I'm going to be asking our panel about news of the day, so I'll do that when we come back in just a moment of Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Equality is the heart and essence of democracy, freedom, and justice. Labor leader A. Philip Randolph.
All right, folks, HBCU Giving Day. The university is Claflin University. Location is in South Carolina. They were founded in 1869. In 2018, Claflin University was ranked as the 7th best HBCU in the nation by U.S. News and World Report. They also lead all HBCUs when it comes to alumni giving. More than 50% of their alumni give back to the university. Support them at claflin.edu, claflin.edu. All right, folks, now some words from one of our partners. You've heard me talk about our friends at Transatlantic Real Estate, who have created a unique investment opportunity that combines legal marijuana and crowdfunding. Now, after you let that sink in for just a moment, think about the growing momentum around legal marijuana in this country. It's been on a number of ballots, and if you are an investor, there's never been a better time to get into the marijuana game. However, as markets grow, so does the barrier to entry, which means it will take millions, if not billions, to invest, not to mention the risk of starting a new venture. That's what makes this opportunity so special. Transatlantic Real Estate is different, and their business model is very simple to understand. They buy land that supports marijuana grow operations and lease it to licensed, high-paying tenants. Now, that means that you're investing in the landlord of a licensed marijuana farm. The best part is they are using crowdfunding to make it easy for the average person to get in before they take the company public. So for a limited time, you can invest as little as $300 or up to $10,000. And here's a pro tip. You must complete and confirm your application to participate in this opportunity. Don't be the person who missed out because you rushed and didn't complete the process. Now, to invest, all you got to do is go to marijuanastock.org. That's marijuanastock.org to get into the game and to get in now. All right, folks, let's talk about some other news of the day, which is pretty interesting. I'm not doing the session story. Y'all can skip that one. Go on to the next one. I don't want to read that one. Okay? Donald Trump fired Jeff Sessions. No shock. But the real thing is that I want to talk about what happened in Houston. Now, first of all, y'all, that's wrong. 19 black women won, not 17. They voted a straight ticket in the state. But check this out. One judge who lost, he got so pissed off. The next day, he dismissed all of the juvenile offenders that came up. And this is what he asked them. He said, "Are you going to kill somebody?" They said, "No." He said, "Okay, you're released." What the hell? He's so mad he lost.
Sour grapes, man.
I mean, and the DA was like, what the hell is going on here? The district attorney there in Houston, Kim Hogg, has blasted him saying, you might, I mean, literally.
Wow.
Crazy.
Literally, he said, "Not gonna kill anybody? Nope. All right, you can go." Every person who came before his court.
There'll be an ethics investigation for sure. Maybe his bar license impacted, but that was definitely wrong. One of the biggest issues I have with Trump, I do have issues with Trump, is his justice policies. I didn't like Jeff Sessions. I'm glad he's gone. And these judges down in Florida, if the voters voted, they need to leave and not be so petty on the way out.
Well, this is in Houston, but that's just nuts. I mean, so it wasn't even case by case basis.
Right.
And he admitted
Broadly.
I lost. I lost. The next day, of course, he didn't show up. His clerk said, well, he took some time off. Yeah, he about to get a lot more time off because he, not going to have that job. But that is just the absolutely craziest thing in the world.
That is. And it's disturbing. But I think it is, to Brandon's point, when he was talking about his party leader, is that I think that this is indicative of the time and the era that we are in, where I'm so very glad that the Democrats did, in fact, win the House, because outside of some of the policies that will be pushed forward, there's also going to be a check and balance. So,
which I think is great. We need more of that.
Yeah.
I thought you missed your shot there with Maryland Democrats, because they were the ones that got in the way of the marijuana licenses.
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing. They got an opportunity to go after Maryland Democrats.
There's a lot of issues with Maryland Democrats. I'd love to have a whole show about that because, talk about racism, boy.
I bet.
Boy.
Feel free to do a Facebook Live on your own page.
All 300 followers, man.
There's
Catch
nothing
me
you gotta do. You can talk 4-5 hours if you want to, all day about them. All right, folks. Tomorrow I'm going to be broadcasting from San Francisco, where Blavity has their Afrotech conference. We're looking forward to that, and so I'll be broadcasting there. Look at Morgan Devon, who is of course a leader of Blavity, so she'll be joining me. So looking forward to that. Plus this weekend I'm going to be in Detroit speaking on Saturday, so it's quite a busy time. Don't forget, folks, you can support Roland Martin Unfiltered by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, joining our fan club. Your donations make this show possible. So join our Bring the Funk fan club. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our followers to contribute at least $50 each for the entire year. If you want to give more, you can certainly do that. Some people have given upwards of $500 because they believe in the show so much. And so again, do that. Also, just so you know, in the month of September, our launch month, we did 8.2 million views across all 3 platforms, Facebook, YouTube, as well as Periscope. Well, that was in September. Last month, in October, we did 14.1 million views. And so you guys are definitely watching the show. Thank you for all of your support. do me a favor as well. We want you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. When you watch the clips from the show, watch them on YouTube. And then that's what we want you to do because, frankly, we generate more money from YouTube than any other platform. And so that money also keeps this show going, allows for us to be able to have the kind of news and information that no one else is talking about that you need as well. I got to go. I'm on a plane in 3 hours, and I ain't even packed. So y'all have a great time. Thanks to our panel. Thank you so very much. Holla!